Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the CRKT LCK Plus. This is the no version of the LCK. First off though, before we go any further, I gotta let you know this guy was sent to me directly by the maker. They reached out to me at the start of this past year and said, hey Nick, we got some new releases coming. You interested in any of them? I said, yeah, absolutely, because the LCK original was a really, really good knife, right? It absolutely blew a lot of folks away because it was just an excellent design coupled with a really nice unassisted action. It was a beautiful thing. And so I liked the original LCK, and so, of course, I want to check out the new version. But as always, I told them I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. They still did send it along. We do have to assume, though, that this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature or the quality of my review. Next thing, size comparison. This is actually not a particularly small knife. I no longer have my original LCK, but this is the Benchmade. Wow. This is a Spyderco, right? This is the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. This is the Ontario Rat number 2. And so we see in terms of blade length, actually, this is slightly longer than the PM2. So this is bigger than the original LCK, and here it is against the Spyderco Delica. And so what we see here is this is not a particularly small knife. Although the handle on it isn't particularly big, the blade itself is not small at all. And actually, it's probably worth comparing it to a ruler as well, because what we see here is this comes in uncontroversially over 3.5 inches, over 9 centimeters here. This is a big, long freaking blade on this guy. This is a bigger knife. But anyways, like I said, this is a follow-up to the CRKT LCK. And that is, well, that's definitely a thing. I like the original version a great deal. It was really, well, I don't want to say groundbreaking, but it was really reassuring to see an action that good coming out of CRKT at that kind of a price point. That was a joy. And so following up to this, it has in many ways very big shoes to fill, so to speak. I guess scales to fill. Anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting knife. The good side, to start with, the clip on this guy is good. It is a deep carry style clip, and it carries very deep in the pocket, as a deep carry clip would imply. This is the only part that's going to be sticking up out of your pocket here because it's well done there. And what we see here is that although the screws themselves are not flat, they are countersunk into the scale such that the clip just hangs out there. So as a result, this guy actually carries quite subtly, right? You can look at this and think, oh, that's a pen. Something like that, and I appreciate that. Next thing, this is a lightweight knife. What we're going to see here is we put this on the scale here. This guy is going to come in at 2.82 ounces for over 3.6 inches of blade. This is a lightweight knife, and that's a great thing. Next thing, the blade on this guy. So the steel on this isn't necessarily amazing at 8CR13 MOV. The thing is, the blade shape is solid with a little bit of flat, a little bit of belly, a nice point on it. The grind on it is reasonably thin. It's not, again, the thinnest thing ever, but you know what? It works, absolutely. And it's a very nice blade shape, and particularly for some kinds of cutting tasks, this can work quite well. And I very much appreciate the nice long sharpening choil on here. It's well, or finger choil, depending how you want to look at the world. But anyways, it's an absolutely solid blade for daily work, right? The reason it was great on the original LCK too. So that's a beautiful thing. Next thing, the assist on this guy. What an assist mechanism is a basically there's a spring inside the handle that I would have shown you if there was a disassembly. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. But what I'm going to do, rather than trying to do this with the blade out, I'm going to hold on to the blade here, and then so the flipper tab, as you press that open, it will force the blade open. The thing is, after a certain point here, I'm going to kind of move the scales a little tiny bit by a little bit. You're going to feel that there's a spring that kicks in and opens it the rest of the way. So in the same way here, it's harder to show off with the blade, but past a certain point, the blade just comes flying open under spring tension. You are touching the blade itself, which is how it gets around a lot of the automatic knife laws in the world, but it is an assisted knife. And this is actually a slightly better assist in many ways than a lot of the assisted knives I've handled lately, because it feels like the closing force is very well done. There is not like, oftentimes it's like, okay, there's a certain point where it's like, got to push it the rest of the way through. No, instead it's relatively even. It feels like the assist on the close here, it starts here, and then you're applying a relatively consistent and small amount of force throughout the rest of the closing range, rather than the ones that are nothing, and then suddenly it's like, whoa, got to put in a bunch of force there. So I think this is a slightly better assist than a lot of the ones I've handled, right? It's clear that CRKT has been putting in some work on how to really improve this system, and they've made the assist a little less annoying than a lot of them out there, particularly on the close, which is where an assist becomes unpleasant, right? So they've definitely done some work there. Next thing, this is a relatively small footprint of a knife. What I mean by that is it's not main. Wow, I don't know what that came from. But anyways, what I mean by that is that this guy is relatively small in the pocket. We see that it almost fits within the silhouette of a Delica here. It is really not a substantially large knife. And the fact that it's a little bit on the thicker side just because you got the grips on the side of it here. But at the same time, this really doesn't take up much space in the pocket. It just kind of hangs out in the back like that with the flipper tab off to the side. It is a pretty reasonable way to go. Carrying this guy is pretty straightforward. So I like that very much. And then finally, I like elements of the design here. These little lines here are pretty attractive, right? They've done a lot of good thinking in terms of lock bar access, the polishes and the liner. It feels like a knife that is pretty well designed. And this is in, I believe Matt Lurch is the designer on this guy. Maybe wrong on the first name, but either way, it's a solid design. And the ergos, by the way, are actually pretty decent too, because you can choke up here if you want, or you can carry it a little bit further back here. This is a little more comfortable for my relatively small hands. But anyways, it's a nice design. I think it's a little interesting, and yeah, it's a follow-up to a good thing. So to me, that's what's good here. It's got a nice design, a small footprint. The assist seems to require a little less closing force, or at least maybe a more distributed closing force is probably the better way to go than usual. It's got a decent blade. It's very light and a subtle clip. A great side. What's great to me is that this is actually a pretty inexpensive knife. This is $35. Now, that is a price that is really pretty low. It's at the price where it's starting to compete with some of the really junky stuff out there in the world, right? You know, below $40 lately has been sort of a price where you can get some good stuff, but a lot of the stuff that you end up finding there isn't all that great, and I think this is a really nice answer in that kind of world. It's competing with a lot of like the blister pack stuff out there, and this is without a doubt better than a lot of the junky stuff that's available at that kind of level. And, you know, so the price on this guy, certainly, I mean, it could be lower, it could always be lower, but at the same time, the price is what makes this knife interesting. At a higher price, I'm not so sure it would be that great, but actually, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be that great, but at this kind of a price point, you know what, okay, this is going to provide a nice option for somebody just getting into the hobby. And so to me, what's great is that they've come in at a very inexpensive price, which justifies a lot of the other decisions made here. On the bad side, to start with, one thing is that this is bigger than the LCK, pretty substantially. Like I said, we're coming in at 3.6-ish inches here, and that's honestly not something I'm in love with because it's over that legal 3.5-inch line. But more importantly, it didn't need to be that much bigger. That's bias, whatever, but okay, that's just a thing. Next thing is that the steel on this guy is 8CR13 MOV. This is a steel that is honestly not all that great, but the thing is, for $35, okay, I can't really get too bent out of shape about it, but if you hold this up to your ear real close and listen, you can hear the sound of the competition coming up behind them with better steels. So I really do hope that they're getting rid of the alphabet soup stuff here at some point here soon. But either way, at this price, I can't really bash them too hard for it. Next thing, this is definitely pocket packing. That is, it has a flipper tab in the back that is going to be constantly packing on whatever's in your pocket all damn day long. That's just the nature of the beast, but it is definitely out there. They've done a little bit of chamfering, but really not that much here. Next thing, unlike the original LCK, this is running on bearings. Rather than a phosphor bronze washer, it's going to make it a little bit less robust to things like dust and grit and that kind of thing. With the assist, that's less of a concern because it's going to open anyways. But nonetheless, I really liked seeing an unassisted washer action on the LCK and going to assisted bearings here, which actually brings me to the last part. And you're welcome, by the way, to chalk this up purely to subjectivity, right? A lot of people must like assists out there someplace, but I am not necessarily one of them. And I kind of feel like, why was this knife given the assist here? Because honestly, one of the trends, and pardon the rant here, but one of the trends I've been happiest about in knife making lately is seeing assists being replaced by good detents and smooth action. Right? There are many knives out there in the world, like this here is the Civivi Ortis, this is a completely unassisted knife. There is no spring at any point involved in this guy. It just opens manually. But the thing is, it has an action that's so good it feels like an assist, right? And so did the original LCK, for that matter. And so as the bar for actions has gotten higher and higher, increasingly, assists have felt more like a crutch that's being used to maybe overcome a poor detent or a poor action. I don't get that feeling on this. It runs very smoothly. It's pretty well done. But honestly, it feels not really like a feature at this point. If somebody says, oh, it's got an assist, I'm like, oh, really? And look, I can see the benefits for them of not maybe needing to fret as much about the tent or action, things like that. There's probably a group of buyers out there for whom the assist is a feature, rather than an anti-feature, where it's like, mine snaps open. And you know what? Great, rock on, have fun. But the thing is, with the rare exception of situations where the blade kind of needs to be able to come open in bad situations, like if you are, rolling around in the mud and you need your knife to open, that's when an assist is going to be helpful. But for the most part, in my estimation, it's mostly moving parts, complexity, legal questions, because this can be a legal issue from some places, and a little bit more in the way of problem on closing. And honestly, it's something that a lot of the competition has moved past. So in my subjective and biased opinion, even if it's a slightly better assist than we're usually seeing, I'd still prefer a manual action like the original, and so this felt a little bit like a step backwards. If you love assists, feel free to disregard every damn thing I'm saying. By God, CRKT is showing up for you this year, but at the same time, for me, that was definitely not something I loved. But like I said, that's why it's bad, not ugly. Some people do enjoy them, I guess. So, to me, that's what's bad, is I don't really feel like this should have been assisted or needed to be. The movement from washes to bearings, I don't get it. It is pocket pecking. 8CR isn't super impressive, but at this price point, okay, I guess. And it is a little bigger than the LCK, and I don't know why that's the case. On the ugly front, unfortunately, this guy is, these back 3 screws are all thread locked shut, and they are using free spinning screws that are relatively shallow. Right, even with a fresh Torx bit on both sides, I was not able to get these guys to unlock. I'm sure that if I, went in there with a soldering iron, I probably could have gotten them loose and whatnot. But the thing is, especially on an assisted knife, where you have the possibility of that spring breaking, or on a bearing knife, where you have it's good to be able to take the thing apart. And I'd like to be able to see whether this can be de-assisted, right? Whether there is the possibility, because it looks like there is actually a detent ball in there, but whether there's the possibility to remove that spring and run this guy as a normal knife. But unfortunately, because of a decision made at the factory, this doesn't appear to be possible. To be fair, this could just be that, the person assembling this particular knife just dunked the whole damn thing in the thing of thread locker first. But at the same time, to me, that's pretty ugly. I hate to see when companies do that, right? So it is very ugly to me that this guy is thread locked shut with free spinning screws in the back here that are very shallow. That's not a beautiful thing. So, final conclusion front, this is it was a little tricky to do the review of, I'm going to be honest, because it's a knife that is going to be a very nice choice for a lot of first-time buyers, right? It's got a nice clip, a nice weight, a decent blade, an improved assist relative to a lot of the other choices out there in the market, a smaller footprint, a nice design, and a price that's competing with a lot of stuff that's really not great. But this is actually quite decidedly not junk. It's a solid little knife. It does have the downsides, being a little bit bigger than the other one, being relatively poor in steel, pocket peck, and using bearings instead of washers. It's assisted in 2021, and it is thread locked shut with free spinning screws, but again, that, I hope, was just this particular unit here. On the balance, though, this is kind of tough. Because, okay, at some level, I have to remember and acknowledge that the group of people I represent, if I represent anybody at all besides me, but, I tend to be the knife geeks, right? The people who are out there. But the thing is, this is a knife that I could hand to a person who doesn't have a knife, and they would use it and enjoy it, and they would think it was absolutely great. And not because it is a pretty decent knife on the whole here. But I think that's really where it's going to have the most success. This is a really good knife to hang in a blister pack in a big box store and sell to somebody who doesn't have any knife, because this is a pretty solid choice. And for those folks, I imagine the, oh wow, snappy assist might actually feel like, because again, it's just a question of perspective. It's a question of what you value in the features. So I think that there are going to be a lot of people who buy this knife, in a blister pack someplace and are really happy with it and find it to be great. And if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, then by all means, great. But once we start getting into that wider world where the competitors aren't just the other companies on that shelf, so to speak, and people see the full wealth of options, they see all the other companies in there, I think things get more complicated. And at least for me, a big part of that is the assist. I don't want to feel like a one-issue boater here, but at this one-issue boater, yeah, that means I have just one issue towed behind my barge. Anyways, I digress. I don't want to seem like a one-issue voter, and in that case, the assist thing is a thing, because it really did feel a bit like a step backwards, a little bit of a head-scratcher, debuting a whole line of assisted knives in 2021 when a lot of the competition's getting out of that market, right? It's like maybe next year they'll come with landline phones at typewriters or or something. Anyways, look, in all seriousness, I do kind of hope that CRKT rejoins their competition in making manual actions that are so good that they feel assisted, even though they're not at the same prices. Or, you know what, if they stay on this path, if they feel like assists are important, they sell well, something like that, then design the knives for very easy conversion to a good manual action. Just make it so you take out the spring, and you've got yourself a great manual action on bearings, right? That would be great. That way, if people see a design that they like, if they want something that's, you know, skinny and looks like this, then they can buy the knife, they take out the assist, and they are happy, you know, happy as a freaking, I don't know, CRKT executive in a pile full of assists. I don't know. Anyways, I digress. So I think that would be a really nice thing to see them, you know, if they're doing that, make it optional, make it removable. It's a feature for those who want it, but it's not a deal breaker for those who don't. But in practice, I think for many in the knife world, that's going to be the main factor here. If the assist and the size appeals well to you, then it's going to be a really great choice. And I think the plus will feel like a plus. Otherwise, I kind of feel like the plus looks a little bit more like a minus. So anyways, I think this is probably going to do pretty well for him, especially on the shelf at the big box store, right? And I bet a number of the people who end up buying one are really going to enjoy it. You know what? They're not going to be wrong, right? There is a lot to love about this knife. But from my particular perspective and from my particular set of desires, I kind of prefer the original one. I think that they took some steps back here in design. And, you know, I'd love to see the LCK... It's hard to do plus like a 1.5 with a, you know, I think they could do something better. And ultimately, I think your own desires are going to make all the difference as to whether this makes a lick, LCK, get it, of sense for you. Anyways, hope this has been interesting to you and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now. I hope this assisted your purchasing decisions. No? Okay. Bye now.